So I'm going to concentrate on two areas, the superficial digital flexor tendon and the deep digital flexor tendon. As I said before, I'm going to break them down. There's different parts that we have to look at. And okay, sorry, one question's popped up and I do actually want to answer this. So the question is, what about the use of IRAP versus PRP and also the use of hot and cold therapy? Is there a need for icing in the initial stages, or do you believe it's better to allow the natural healing stages the body produces and allow heat? Okay, ice. It's not often you get someone say that, get in trouble saying that in the street. But ice is really important. Why is that? When you get a damaged tendon ligament, this collagenase is released. If that's allowed to build a head of steam, that collagenase damages the tendon ligament and actually makes it look worse. So I will often, even when I see a superficial digital flexor tendon injury or something, I will sit on it for a day or two if it's initially come up after competition, because you want to see what it's like. In the meantime, I'll be icing and getting rid of that there. I don't see a place for hot therapy. Most of the time we're trying to get rid of heat and try and slow down that in an initial phase. Inflammation leads to a lot of changes in the ligaments, and I really think icing is very beneficial. It's one of the single biggest things you can do to prevent injuries developing. It really is. I can't preach that more loud enough than anything like that there. IRAP versus PRP. Now, IRAP's more a joint product. PRP can be used in joints, and I do use it in joints at certain times, but I generally find IRAP's a very good joint product. Really like it. Very useful in warm bloods that are sensitive to laminitis following cortisone. So IRAP's are very beneficial. Doesn't have a swab time, really good. PRP is your healing response. So for certain issues like meniscal injuries and stifle, really useful for. So it's a really good product. Next question, should you ice immediately after exercise? Yes. Can't preach loud enough. Okay, simple management tool. I'd recommend it to everyone if you can do it. If you've got a freezer and reusable ice boots of whatever type, it doesn't matter what type. Ride your horse, work your horse, jump off, grab the ice boots out of the freezer as you take your saddle stuff, let them thaw slightly, hose the horse off, whack them on the legs, train the horse to use them on the back legs as well if you can. Some horses don't like it and they do kick, but if you can train them, leave them on for 10 minutes. You don't need this 20 minutes, 30 minutes. 10 minutes is really useful and beneficial, keeps the heat out of the legs while you put the rugs on, put your gear away. It's perfect timing, pull them off, horse back to the paddock or box. It's absolutely perfect, love it. So let's go back here. Suspensory ligament types of injury. We've got proximal suspensory, the hind limb and the forelimb. They can present quite differently, often minimal swelling, identified by blocking, pain response and stuff. For the forelimb, you can identify on a pain response and palpation. The hind limb is a bit harder. So this is a forelimb proximal suspensory. You see here, you've got bone lifting on this cannon bone, and you got this blackened area all through the suspensory ligament. This is quite a severe injury. The horse was very lame with it, and you've got a lot of damage going on here. So that is definitely something to look at. Then your body injuries, this is down here. So cross-sectional, get your bearings. You've got your superficial digital flexor, check deep digital flexor, check ligament, and suspensory down here. Nice big black hole. This is a longitudinal scan. You can see that there. And then we've got our branch injuries. This is a pretty ugly branch, very thickened, and you've got loss of fiber density and details there. Okay, so they all are dealt with in a slightly different way. This is the branch there, another branch injury there. So treatment options, pure rest. Yep, can be for certain situations, certain horses, depending on what need, rest can be useful. Okay, so that's just literally confinement for a period of time until you get the soundness, and then gradually increase the size of the paddock. Shockwave for insertional injuries is a very useful tool, very beneficial. And so those high suspensories in the forelimb, definitely. Hind limb, yes, I do use it in the hind limb, but it depends what's going on. There may be other things done as well there to treat those there. PRP. Yeah, look, I actually find PRP, I know I said before I like to inject it into something. I've had a couple of proximal suspensory, especially in the forelimb, that are recurring and keep coming back. And one thing I have done is just infiltrate the area with PRP. So PRP is platelet-rich plasma. The platelets degranulate and they drive all the healing response in that area. You're putting it in high concentration. I have found that really useful and started using that probably more as a frontline treatment because I've had such good results with it. The laser therapy, again, very useful for those inflamed ligaments or very small core lesions that I can't get something into. So got to remember your cross-sectional area for some of these tendons is sort of 1.3. So even if you've got a 30% core lesion if we go back, this here lesion here, so this is probably only in volume is probably only about a mil, 1.5 mils. So it's quite hard to get stuff into. So if you need quite a big area, if you're injecting PRP into something like that there, so I will use laser therapy. So that's very good. And then steroids. Why would you use steroids, you might ask? Well, some of these proximal suspensories are just inflamed and you just need to get some anti-inflammatories in. So steroids can be very useful. By steroids, I mean corticosteroids, and we inject those in. Now, I do use steroids in the hind legs as well. Should have put a diagram. The proximal suspensory at the back and the hind leg attaches there on the cannon bone. At the very top here is a tarsometatarsal joint with this joint capsule coming out and round, and you can actually block the tarsometatarsal joint when you block the proximal suspensory. So what I actually do is use that fact that those two are quite linked together, and I'll inject cortisone into the tarsometatarsal joint, knowing that it's going to leach out into this proximal suspensory region. Find that a very useful management plan for especially these older horses that have got low-grade proximal suspensories behind, and you want to try and maintain soundness. So for those horses, I'll be injecting their hocks probably. I even use IRAP in them as well. IRAP works really well in that area. I know someone mentioned IRAP versus PRP. For those proximal suspensories, IRAP into the tarsometatarsal joint and some shockwave has been very, very useful in my hands and find it very beneficial to use at times. So in the rehab, when we're rehabbing a suspensory ligament, when does it do the most work? What's its job? Suspensory ligament, by definition, suspends the fetlock joint off the ground. So anything that allows the fetlock joint to drop further and move further will put more strain on the suspensory ligament. You have to also think, how do you prevent a repeat injury? So we do think about what did we do previously that caused this to set up? Surfaces. Now, when we talk about the suspension of the fetlock joint, in a deeper surface, the foot will go deeper into the surface and the fetlock will drop further. That fetlock dropping further puts more strain on the suspensory. Got to be careful of that. So deep surface, I like a firm surface. This is one of those ones where you would say roads, that old school thinking. Yep. How do you change things to prevent repeat injury in suspensory? We go back to the deep surfaces. If we think deep surfaces are implicated in that, we have to vary our workloads. You can't always go back to the arena all the time and do that there. So that is something that you do there. So we worry about the surfaces we're working them on. Also, how much work does the horse need? Okay, now, I know this is a bit of a difficult thing to say, but I think when you're riding, especially if you've got an older horse that's had an injury like this here, how much work do you need to do with this horse to prevent it doing it? How much work do you actually need to do with this horse to get it to do the function you want it to do? And that's very scientific and breaking it down into, the function of the horse. Your older horse, your schoolmaster, you need to manage their workload. You don't need to do too much. You've got to aim for perfection. So, example, medium trot. Okay, simple example, medium trot out of the corner. We're all doing it across the diagonal. If your corner's not good enough, don't waste that medium trot, okay? Don't try and fix your medium trot halfway across your medium trot. You're wasting those strides. So you have to think more. When we say how much work does the horse need, you have to think, how can I limit the number of strides I do in a certain gait? Whether that's piaffe, passage, show jumping, how do you manage it? Like, you know, let's be honest, I was a show jumper a long time ago. As someone very rightly pointed out to me, Jamie Coleman, who a lot of you will know, I put the horse to the jump, the horse jumps the jump. Okay, now very good riders can help a horse and make a horse, because I know that, I realize that. But for all the normal people like you and me, we get the horse to the jump and then the horse jumps. So for an example, for a schoolmaster show jumper, why do we need to jump a fence when all my job, what I'm training and what I'm learning to do is get the horse to a pole? So I would say for those older horses, reducing the amount of jumping is great. Your dressage horses, why do you need to keep doing piaffe and passage? Aim for something. Sit down. What do you think? I need to get, today I want to practice piaffe and passage or tempi changes. If you get them, I know it's an amazing feel. I realize that. I know I've been a horse rider. My wife's dressed, and that feel, the buzz, you can see it in people when they've ridden a horse. Just be very careful. Don't overdo it, okay? So the fetlock joint suspends. This is quite a deep grass arena. You can see how far that foot's in the ground, and this fetlock's on the ground. It's putting all the pressure on that there. Horses can often, with suspensory ligament injuries, special proximus, be lamer on a softer surface than a harder. So it is something you need to be aware of. So here's an example using the lameness locator. This is a horse with a right hind impact asymmetry. This was on a beautiful soft arena, which every day of the week I would have shown you, and you would have said that's a perfect arena to work that horse on. The horse was lame. He's 2 out of 5 lame behind on that surface. This is lunging the horse on the circle of death. Believe it or not, this is a normal trace for lunge. This is very normal. We're getting left hind push off asymmetry on the circle and right hind impact asymmetry. That's a normal with the lameness locator. This horse was actually sound on the circle of death, but lame on the arena. And that's because he had a proximal suspensory. So you have to take that into consideration. So when you're rehabbing these, what's my thought process? It's building basic fitness and strength and gradually loading this ligament. I realize we've got to get them back into the arenas often, so we'll introduce arena work once a week, early, 6 weeks into the rehab process, and build up in there, so we give this ligament a chance to remodel. When we take it out of the paddock or when we start riding it, it's only got a certain amount of strength in it. We've got to now train that. When we go back to those earlier slides that I showed, exercise is good and improves the appearance of a ligament, of a tendon with work. We're doing that with the rehab. That's why the rehab process is so important. Rehab process, no matter what treatment, for example, I've only done it for superficial digital flexor. The rehab process improved the prognosis by 20% of my data. So horses that went under a controlled exercise program, no matter what I did to them, whether I did nothing or I did something, when I compared it to matches, it was 20% improvement from your rehab. Okay, so that is something to remember. The hind feet, when I said someone messaged about hind suspensories, we don't want the toe to drop into the ground. So one way we can do that is, this is a Denois suspensory front shoe. It's got a very wide toe plate and some onion heels. We call them onion heels, slightly wider heels. This prevents the foot dropping into those deeper surfaces. It's very common in America and Europe to use these shoes. It's gaining popularity here, and it is something I would advise you to keep using. And I do like them. You load the ligaments gradually. Lateral work will put an inordinate amount of strain on these suspensories. You've got to remember, trot half pass, a steep trot half pass has been shown to have the same forces going up the leg as galloping. at the end of the Melbourne Cup. So the SDFT, I won't touch. We're running. I'll probably run out of time. I'll actually use this time to answer some questions instead of going through the SDFT. So someone answered the Denois shoe, is it the same idea as rolling toe? No, it's not. It's actually different. It's giving support. Rolling toe is encouraging the breakover and getting you rolling forward and getting off the back of the foot. The Denois shoe is actually about stopping the ground interaction forces and you dropping down into a softer surface. So probably the best way, it's snowshoes, basically, like you and I wearing snowshoes. You spread the weight, you don't drop in, you don't have that narrow band where you go deep into the foot. So the one thing with the Denois shoe and that style of shoe, and we can do it different ways, is it can be a bit slippy. You have to be aware if you have to ride the horse on a slippy grass arena, so the eventers, you might need a little toe stud. I don't know, I wasn't a big fan of studs, but you might actually need a little outside toe stud to give them a bit of support because they will slip on the turns. Okay, so questions are coming in thick and fast. Is it better to exercise without boots or bandages where possible? Would you still recommend ice therapy after exercise without boots or bandages? The function of boots or bandages is to protect the leg from another foot. Doesn't protect the tendon, doesn't protect the ligament. So it makes no difference. I'm quite comfortable with boots. I know a lot of dressage riders like bandages, and that's the aesthetics. There's no difference with them. I don't believe in this hyperthermia theory. I don't think I've ever seen a tendon injury due to overcooking of a tendon. So I wouldn't be rushing to change that there. Boots or bandages. I have seen some horrific tendon injuries due to horses striking themselves from behind. So I do actually like boots on them or some sort of support to protect against that. That's what you're protecting against. You're not protecting the tendons. I'd ice them as well. It's not just for the tendons, it's for the joints, cooling the blood going down into the foot. The blood vessels are really superficial. You cool the blood as it goes down the leg, into the foot, it's nice and cold, and comes back up and it's away. That will help cool your foot. So yeah, I do love ice. You can't do enough. Okay, 2 questions. So a couple of questions. One question is, can Denois shoes be used on the hinds? Yes, they're particularly useful for the hinds. I would use them all the time in the hind shoes. There's a question about hind limb proximal suspensory and sort of the compartment syndrome that generates. I try and settle those inflammation down, so that's where I do use steroids into the I do use steroids into all those tarsometatarsal joints. I think that really helps. Surgery, look, I think there's some ethical things that we have to consider because you can do a fasciotomy and release that. Generally, there's a neurectomy done at the same time. I think we have to consider that. And as an industry, we have to decide whether that's ethically right or not, and that's each individual's decision. So, in resources, do you see a greater incidence of soft tissue injuries in the leading leg? No, I don't. It's generally quite mixed, so it's not too bad. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. I will try and answer some of these questions later at the end. So, superficial digital flexor tendon, we'll leave them. The DDFT, Deep Digital Flexor Tendon. 2 parts I'm going to consider it. One is above the foot and the other is within the foot, and they're both important. DDFT above the foot's not generally a major problem, but I'm going to link it in with check ligaments. So this is a horse that had inflammation of the insertion of his check ligament on the deep digital flexor tendon, seen by no lameness sign, but a bit of puffiness in the area, and that responded really well to anti-inflammatories and did very well. If you've got a true DDFT lesion, similar management, superficial digital flexor tendon. If you get the check ligament involved, so you get a big fat check ligament, so this is a check ligament here injury. So this mottled appearance, that's the normal leg, nice moon shape check ligament, and you've got this mottled appearance. It's a poor prognostic indicator of check ligaments. They're always left fat, and some of them, the DDFTs, can actually go into the injuries can go into the tendon sheath behind the fetlock. So I had a question there. Can inflammation in the tendon sheath turn to a ligament injury? And is it possible to over ice, freezing the leg too much, like say cryotherapy, compression boots? Inflammation in the tendon sheath is yes, can lead. I don't know if it can lead to, but it can certainly warrant. And I think the more we investigate these, the more we see some mild DDFT or manica flexuria issues in this tendon sheath. So it is worthwhile scanning them early. Some of these older horses obviously have chronic inflammation of there, and you can never get rid of them. Is it possible to over ice, freezing the leg too much? Well, no, actually, no. There's actually some work done on laminitis work on horses that induced with, I was literally just reading it today, cryotherapy, 24-hour cryotherapy for horses with laminitis that was induced by sepsis. So they were septic and they got laminitis, and they're actually iced for 24 hours a day. It's a big intensive exercise, but icing those there. So I don't think you can really over ice. The only problem you can have is if you've got the ice direct on the skin, you can get ice burns similar to your eye. So they do need to be, the ice does need to be kept off the skin, whether it's using water. So the cold therapy boots, the bubble boots, they're not really made anymore. They're fabulous. They're really cold. Like if you do come across them, I can get to 60 seconds without having to take my arm out because it's that cold. So if you can get further, well done to you. The Ice Vibe boots, someone's asked about Ice Vibe boots. Look, I'm not really sure. There's not a lot of data on this here, and I do try to base a lot of the stuff on data. And I think the Ice Vibe boots, I actually think their ice bit's really good. It's really simple to use. It's really cheap. You can wrap them around. You can even use a stable bandage to put them on. They're really good. I don't know if you necessarily, I don't think we've, I think they're good. I don't know really if the vibration bit is that much better than just normal ice boots. Okay. So I've done that. Okay. So let's move on here because we're starting to move on in time, and I don't want to bore you all to tears. We're getting near to 9 o'clock, coming up to the hour. So let's move above the foot. We've dealt with that there. Now, DDFT within the foot. Sorry for this GIF. It really is. It's a very poor injury. It is a terribly poor injury, and I'll just rip the Band-Aid off now. We have to diagnose them by MRI. And part of the reason for that is it's really hard to gain access to treat them. So this is the deep digital flexor tendon here, running down here past the navicular bone and inserting on the pedal bone here. So it's really hard to, it often involves multiple structures. So when we do MRIs, if you had a horse had an MRI, you'll often come back with a list of things that are abnormal. And we have to then work out what we're doing. So the navicular bone can be involved, the navicular bursa can be involved, the collateral ligaments of the foot, the suspensory ligament of the navicular bone, the impar ligament of the navicular bone. It can all be involved. So it's something we have to look at. This is the sort of the anatomy that we look at. So when we've got a deep digital flexor tendon link, this is the heel here, deep digital flexor tendon injury. We have to work out where the injury is, first of all. Is it an insertional? Is insertion in there? In which case then we'd maybe consider shockwave through the sole of the foot. If we can get that foot soft enough, might be beneficial. if we can get good penetration. Is the deep digital flexor tendon damaged in this region as it bends around the navicular bone? The navicular bursa is there. So two things we've got to look for there. One is there adhesions between the deep digital flexor tendon and the navicular bone, in which case we may actually need to do surgery to cut those. But again, prognosis may not be great depending on that. There are some cases that come back very well, but I know other cases haven't. Is there inflammation in that navicular bursa? Do we need to treat that as well as treat the deep digital flexor tendon? And also, is there the N word, navicular disease? Even though we've changed it to sort of deal with this back half of the foot, and also these associated suspensory ligament of the navicular bone and the impar ligament, we have to deal with those. So it's all part of the stuff that we have to deal with. The rehab plan, the farrier is your friend. Please don't fall out with your farrier at this point. It's not a good thing to fall out with the farrier at this point. It really is part of something. Someone just answered, based on this session, would you suggest IRAP for DDFT in the foot to settle injury before commencing rehab? It would depend. It would depend where the injury was. Or so if we go back, I'm going to just go back here. We go back to this drawing here. If you've got a mid portion of the foot DDFT injury and you've got inflammation of the navicular bursa, because these two are coming through, I would actually consider using PRP. So initially for a while there, we used to always inject them via needle through the back of the heel bulbs, and we had to take it through the middle of the deep digital flexor tendon, which is not ideal. Now via ultrasound, we can actually come in front of the deep digital flexor tendon, sending a needle in from up here, deep down in, using the ultrasound to guide us in, and we can get into that navicular bursa. That's a very useful way to do things. I quite like it. It takes a bit of getting used to, but I've got used to it now, and it's quite a simple way to do it. So I would probably use PRP over IRAP, because IRAP generally needs a few treatments. PRP, we can get away with 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, to be honest, and it works really well. So I hope that answers your question. So let's keep going. Your farrier is the key. We've got to deal with any foot conformation issues. So this is a -3 palmar angle. This is a -4. Now these horses, as you can imagine, you've got your deep digital flexor running down the back here and inserting. They'll be putting excessive pressure on that deep digital flexor. We've got to deal with that. Initially, I would recommend wedging the foot. And why is that? It takes the pressure off that deep digital flexor tendon. But if you've got a poor conformation of the heels, so say the heels are running forward, that flat-footed thoroughbred look, the heels are well forward in front of the foot. If you wedge them up, you'll crush those heels even more. So you will crush those heels even more. So you've got to be very careful. You don't keep them on too long if you do use them. And you have to actively work to bring the heels back. So it's actually you cut the heels off, which seems strange, but you cut, so the hoof tubules on a collapsed foot will be growing a bit like that. They're running forward. We actually cut them back to almost sort of that level if we can. So then they're more upright, because they generally come down and then spoon forward. If we can get them like that there and get the shoe back to here and wedge up there, you'll get them to grow straight, and that can be beneficial at that time. You don't want to be putting a lot of pressure up on the frog. So when we're looking at solar support, we're going to be very careful how we manage those. Too much upward pressure, as you can imagine, you're just pressing on you're putting constant pressure on the things that are sore and causing your lameness issue. Wrong way. So farrier, you want to get heel support. You want to increase the breakover, so you want to really wedge those, and you can put slight elevation in them. You want to try and slow the heel drop, so we want to support the back of the foot. Otherwise, we can put a metal plate across the back of a normal shoe, and that will, and with some dental impression material underneath it, that will stop the foot dropping down as much, but not create upwards pressure. We will allow the frog, and it depends how the frog is as well. Each horse has to be shot individually. This is a shoe that I quite like for further down the track when we're getting them back into work, because the frog can be sitting through here and start to function normally. So chronic pressure on the top of frogs will mean you get this mushy, froggy thing, and it's not good for the horse. So you have to support their heels. And this here is what we call an onion shoe. So it's got a wide base at the back and gives a lot of support. A very useful shoe. A lot of farriers will just make that out of a bigger shoe and bring it down and use the steel within that shoe to create that there. So most guys will do it really well for you. Some of the key things with the DDFT within the foot, it's really hard to follow them, because unless you can do serial MRI images, you have to go use your lameness grade. I obviously use the lameness locator for clients that know me. I use that there as a really useful means to check it's so accurate. You also routine x-rays of the feet to get the balance if we're addressing that there. Addressing any weight issues, really, really important to get the weight off these guys. So your water walker, your treadmills, your walking machines, I will get them started on that pretty early to try and, I realize we can only starve horses so much, and we've got to do some exercise. So non-concussive, reducing the weight on the leg will be beneficial. The treadmill is useful because I can tip it back. So I'm putting it up like that. So I know I've done a couple of horses DDFTs, got them on treadmills and they're walking at 6 degrees. 6 degrees is a big walk. That gets some exercise into them and builds up strength behind and takes the weight off the front. So that can be very useful. Walking machines, I'm not a big fan of for these, because they're going round and round and round and round and round and round and round in circles. And they can quite easily clock up 7 or 8 kilometers quite quickly, believe it or not, in some of those. So you have to be careful using that there, but I would use a water walker, water treadmill, something where we can get buoyancy and we're taking the weight off the horse, but make the horse work. If you can't swim, that would be great. Beach work as well will work as well if you've got access to the beach. So the DDFT, you've got an injury within the foot, you want to gradually walking them. I'd like to get these horses into a yard. I think horses do better in a yard, so a sand yard, something like that there. I quite like deep sand, believe it or not, because they can get the foot into a position where they're comfortable, and often they'll tell you how they like to be shod. So some things I do if I'm struggling how to get a horse set up for shoeing with a DDF, like we've tried a couple of things and hasn't worked, is often watching them in a deep sand yard. Just let them stand for 30 minutes and watch them. How do they want to stand? Do they want to stand with a wedge, or do they want to stand a bit differently? You'll see it. It's quite useful to do that there. You don't want them running around. You don't want them galloping like idiots. Obviously, as you can imagine, it's going to put pressure. I start with hand walking with these guys, and you build it up over many, many months. And then you start on the firm surfaces. So you're always on the firm surfaces for these guys, a nice even surface, not too much drop. And you will change the shoes during the rehab, unfortunately, because if we've wedged, we need to decrease that wedge over time and make sure the foot conformation's right and build them up from there. So that's something there. This is a horse that had a DDFT lesion here. You see this here. In the medial compartment. So it's an unfortunate one. So I've got some questions. So I'm going to run through any questions. If you've got a question, fire through. High suspensory injuries. I think I've covered that there. Some treatment and management. You have to be careful with them. Lateral work for a dressage horse can be quite hard on those high suspensories. Interestingly, they'll often be lamer when the leg's on the outside of the circle. Can anything be done for long-term medial collateral ligament injury? What should be done in the first instance? Look, stabilizing, initially you stabilize and ice and decrease the inflammation. I think laser therapy is actually quite useful for these medial collateral ligament injuries. I think that's where, speaking from personal experience, it's really been useful to use that there. So I find it very useful, the laser therapy. And we can lease units out to people. What you look for in a laser? Well, look, there's different types of lasers, type 4, type 3. Type 4 is veterinary only. I wouldn't let you loose with it because you can actually burn a horse with that. Type 3 cold therapy laser is a lot safer to use, and that can be beneficial. So there's variations, and it depends what you're looking to use out of them. Is it essential to shoe the hind hooves to prevent injury? Is there any correlation with shod and non-shod hind hooves? No, there's actually no data. Okay, so there's limited data. So this comes back to my statement early on. There's very limited data on performance horses. So one of the things, there's only a recent study done showing the hind foot conformation is linked to negative plantar angles. So plantar, we call it back foot, the negative angle. So if the heel is lower than the toe of the pedal bone region is negative, that will be a positive indicator that you will have either fetlock or hock pain. Doesn't seem to be correlated with stifle from the results thing, but it is definitely something to consider. Right, so the shod versus unshod, I think it just depends on your surface. If your horse copes fine without shoes and does it, I don't think they need it unless there's specifically something you want to do. The one thing I would say, some rehab horses, I'll try and barefoot do them. And the reason for that is the foot will wear the way it wants to wear. So if we've got something that's got a bit of imbalance and we're sort of struggling with, often working in barefoot will allow us to see which way the horse wants to be shod, and that can be useful. Would you recommend the use of stable boots if a horse has slightly swollen pasterns in the morning after a night of stabling? Yeah, look, decreasing inflammation, if you can keep the pressure on, is beneficial, yes. What kind of boots or bandage would you suggest for a show jumper with bilateral suspensory lesions in the hind legs? You're probably it's more your shoeing, to be honest. That's going to be more beneficial than what boots or bandages you put on, to be honest. So I think I've answered that one. Answer live. Okay. Bridle lameness versus lameness due to suspensory injury. I don't think bridle lameness is a thing. I'll come out and say it, and I probably will be honest. I think those horses are generally lame. I've seen plenty of horses that, as soon as I add the rider on, that tips the horse over the edge, and we see lameness. There's one. I know one horse that comes to mind, springs to mind of a horse. I've asked for a second opinion, and the horse trotted up, sound as a bell, absolutely 100% sound. You vet the horse every day of the week and it would pass. You lunge it, absolutely fine. As soon as you put the rider on board, it was lame, and it was ridden by a very, very good rider, and a very high level eventer, and it most definitely was. So I don't think there's such thing as a bridle lameness. I think it generally was a lameness. So I hope that answers. Do you think bridle lameness is a valid diagnosis these days? No, I think I've come out and said that. I think some of those horses, maybe they're not through, or maybe they're not quite through. Yes, there may be a variation when we're getting down to the subtlety. So high level dressage horse, or any sort of dressage horse, is it through? Is it carrying itself, or is the rider invoking an issue? So that could be possibly, but I think generally bridle lameness is not a thing. No, I think we've got an issue. Compression. I'm not really sure what you're asking there, but so we'll see. Okay, so thank you very much for attending. I want a big shout out. We're obviously all going through a lot of problems. There's 2 questions come through. Oh, compression boots or wrap. Compression boots or wraps, look, I don't think it makes a difference. I think stable bandages are useful for those older horses to keep the swelling out of the legs. And are bow tendons due to incorrect bandage and a common injury? You see, bandage bows, everyone will give a horse one. You will do it. We've all done it. I've done it. It causes a nip. It's just inflammation. It's actually just the skin. It's not a damaged tendon. If you scan those there, you'll see the tendon's normal. It's thickening underneath the skin. So yeah, it's not a big thing. It's just anti-inflammatory. You get rid of them straight away. So it's not a damaged tendon. Okay, but it is worthwhile scanning them to make sure you haven't just bandage the leg and we think it's a bandage, but yeah, I would recommend scanning them anyway. Okay. So in the theme of supporting local riders and businesses, if you needed some wine over Easter, please shout out to Jane Gordon. Jane, as you know, is a dresses rider in the Mornington Peninsula, and she is the marketing manager for Prancing Estate, which is a biodynamic winery on the Mornington Peninsula. Fabulous wine, and yeah, if you don't have her contact details or can't find her on Facebook or Instagram, she is a connoisseur of wines and can talk, like I can talk for hours on tendon ligament injuries. Jane can talk for many, many more hours on wines and the variations of it. So if you're not sure what to get, give her a ring. Then I think we had one more question. Lara Tweedy, a question, has also kindly offered a discount offer all LT or Magnolia Stable branded products. You use the code TEVS25 and the code's valid until midnight on Friday the 10th of April. So great range of products. The overreach boots are fabulous and really useful when we're changing shoes and we don't want a horse to rip shoes off. Really good value for money, especially with your discount. Please check along and have a look there and support local businesses. And so I am doing more webinars. I'm going to do them every 2 weeks. I think is realistic for me to get them together. The next one is managing the older competition horse to maintain health and soundness. I've been asked multiple times about this, and I'm going to bite the bullet. I will discuss Pentazan versus HA versus joint foods, etc. And I might even discuss gastric ulcers. I've always tried to avoid that topic. So we will discuss that there. And then the one after that there is a one not to miss. I have convinced Dr. Ian Fulton of the Ballarat Veterinary Practice to come along and discuss advanced diagnostic imaging. So his hospital is one of the few in Australia to have MRI machine. He's also got a scintigraphy machine. So he's going to discuss the use of scintigraphy versus MRI, and when he would use them, when he might use both, and what the advantages and disadvantages of each thing are. So that'll be a really good one. But the next one's managing the older competition horse and the sound horse. So thank you very much for coming along. Please give me your feedback. You will be sent a short survey. I'm happy to do these. I really enjoy doing this. I love educating people. I love people getting educated about all this stuff. So happy to answer questions. If you have a question I haven't answered during the evening, so I'm just going to answer one final question. While the rehabilitation is underway and there are continuous reviews with ultrasound, you can observe the tendon repair. However, there's a moment when the ultrasound does not show any difference and we have new tissue repair but is not ready for high workload yet. What do you do? That's where, with these here, I think it comes down to clinicians' experience and management of what you're doing there. Sometimes you have to push a little bit and see the response. So some of those ones when you get to, so a check ligament's an example. I can only get them to look so good on ultrasound. I cannot get them to look perfect. So at some point I have to push them. Now, what happens when you push a tendon on ultrasound? If it's ready, it'll probably stay the same. It won't change. If it's not ready, it'll start to get inflammation. It will start to get swelling. So before you get a tendon ligament injury, you get desmitis. So it's inflammation of the tendon or the ligament. You have to address that and see if that's happening. So with those there horses, if that horse is starting to swell up, if you're at that crossroad junction, what I'll often do is say, okay, we're going to step it up for 2 weeks. If you see any sudden increase in swelling or anything else, stop, ring me. But I'll come back in 2 weeks' time, rescan it and see where it's at. If it hasn't changed in 2 weeks, I'm pretty confident to push on and they'll be fine. So I hope that answers the question. So please sign up for the next one. You'll see it on Facebook or via email if I've sent you a link. And if you have any questions or any other topics you would like me to discuss, I'm happy to organize and go through those. But the next one, as I said, managing the older competition horse to maintain health and soundness. And we'll look at metabolic disease, gastric ulcers, health, management, workload, and training. So hope you enjoy that. And yeah, be back soon. Thank you very much for coming, guys. And don't forget your codes. TVS25 for Lara Tweedy at laratweedy.com.au. And if you need a good bottle of wine, cannot recommend these guys enough. Beautiful wine, all very healthy, biodynamic, great local places. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming.